Hey, here we are live. Today's episode is brought to you by DTE Energy. DTE has several tools and resources available to their customers that can assist with lowering their energy bills and reducing energy use. And we'll have more on that to come. But at this point, as you can see, if you're watching live, something new. And I want to bring in my partner, Brian Boesch, who is the voice of Michigan basketball. You can hear him at 4:30 this weekend because we are finally kicking off the season against Fresno State. Mr. Boesch, let us know what's going on.
Yeah, we're fired up to try something new here on In the Trenches presented by Meijer. If you're listening on the audio feed, nothing really will change, but we are going to be streaming the 7 from 77 portion of In the Trenches pretty much every Tuesday around 10:30, 10:35 from the start of the season here to we'll see how it goes. Definitely excited about the possibility. What we will do is ensure that if you're listening on audio, that'll be the only place you get the player interview. So if you're watching right now, we still encourage you to download, rate, review the podcast, get it on Wednesday. We've got a great conversation coming up with Zeke Berry on Wednesday's audio version. And if you're on the video only platform, we will also have a special thing each and every week. We'll mix it up. This week, Jack Miller will be joining us around 11 o'clock this morning to talk about his thoughts on the offseason, preview Fresno State, and a whole lot more. And MGO Blue Podcast, still your home for Conquering Heroes. That's back coming up on Thursday with Paul Judah, an absolute star for Team USA in the Paris Games. We'll have him coming up Thursday. John's Keys of the Game locker room speech. Those will come out Thursday afternoon. Then the recap late Saturday, early Sunday. We're rocking and rolling, fired up. John, I know this will be a little bit different, but we're doing a 7 from 77. So let's get it started very simply. It's game week. How exciting is this from a player, a coach standpoint? And I'll ask you this, from a fan standpoint, has the national championship brought about any kind of different feelings, a unique approach to the offseason, maybe more of a feeling of, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of enjoying basking in the glow of being the defending national champs. I'm glad the season's here, but I wasn't as anxious for it as I was maybe the last couple of years, considering how it finished.
That's a really tough question to answer because, yeah, there is a basking of in the glow from January. Obviously, the national championship is fresh, even into February. But as soon as the offseason program begins, the challenge for these players is to be able to enjoy those memories, but then look back and say, well, how did we do that? What was different last year than it was in 21 or 22? How do we replicate that in terms of our preparation? Because there's going to be a whole new cast of characters. And in leading up to the season, yeah, there's still enjoyment about talking about the defending national champs, and that is Michigan this year. But there's also, I don't want to say added pressure, but there is, how do we follow that up? And you definitely don't want to do it like the 98 season where you lost the first two games. And unfortunately, I have that in my memory bank, and it's something that will be etched there forever. And I've talked to the guys about what it feels like taking the field the first time after a national championship. And there's also this excitement. Yeah, some of it is going to be for the fans because it's the first time they get a chance to see this team on the field since they played in Houston. But the excitement is about who's going to be the quarterback, who is taking over after J.J. McCarthy. It's about Donovan Edwards. Can he be the guy after Blake Corum? We saw him compliment Blake Corum, and we've heard a lot of him, throughout the offseason, the talk that he's had, the self-talk that he's had with himself and the standards. But it's a new offensive line. It's a new defensive coordinator and basically new defensive staff. So the excitement is now turning the page to what this team will be this year.
Number 2 on our 7 from 77. Just now that we're past camp into game week, 2 or 3 takeaways you had from camp, and how does a team transition from camp mode to game prep mode?
So my biggest takeaway is that the guys that are going to be taking the field, whether it's, Josh Preet, left guard, don't know a lot about him, but I know he's got some really good experience, and I've seen him practice. And then Giovanni El-Hadi and Miles Hinton, and whether it's Davis Warren or Alex Orji, there's a lot of guys that the only reason they weren't on the field last year was because they were blocked by fifth-year seniors and fourth-year seniors that decided to come back for unfinished business. They had the talent. They could have been a more of a part of that story last year. They just had guys in front of them. Now they're going to be unlocked, and I think the country, the world, the Big Ten, Michigan fans are going to get a chance to see exactly who those are and how good those players are. So the depth of talent will be shown off. And then on the defense, in regards to Jair Hill and TJ Guy, ones that we've been excited about in Ike and Inoeta and all of these guys that are going to make up the depth of the defense, they're guys that have developed, they've changed their bodies. And I talked to Sharon Moore earlier in the week. One of the things that he talked about, and he talked about this in regards to Giovanni El-Hadi, he's down about 10, 12 pounds, but it's the body composition that has transformed so much from last year to this year. And he's a guy that's going to be in a leadership role. We've got the captains. It's the excitement it's real. It's there. And then the transition from camp to game week is the excitement about hitting somebody else other than, going up against a more maize and blue and the same guys over and over. And all of the things that irritated you day one of fall camp, they irritate you even more now. Now it's your opportunity to take that passion, that irritation, and take it out on someone else.
On the podcast feed, we do have the radio replay of the Inside Michigan Football radio show. Both head coach Sharon Moore and defensive coordinator Wink Martindale, in like the first, 3 minutes of the conversations, alluded to the fact that these guys are chomping at the bit to hit somebody else. Also, from that show on Monday night, it's our number 3 on our 7 from 77. Sharon Moore elaborated. He did not solidify the quarterback situation, but he did give us a roadmap. It has come down at this point to Alex Orji or Davis Warren, and he said that they will know internally as a coaching staff no later than Wednesday's practice. Might take some discussion, some time, whatever else. He will tell the players on Thursday. And then what I thought was really interesting was he said he would talk with the players about how that information could get out publicly. Would it be a Friday announcement? Would it be, hey, we're waiting until kickoff, all of that. So we have a roadmap, your observations, your takeaways from that with Coach Moore's comments.
Both of those guys have really stepped up. And in what I've gleaned from Coach, when I've gleaned from the players and other coaches, is the decision is basically going to come down to, as they get to game week and both are neck and neck, who is able to execute the game plan to the highest level? Who gives Michigan the best opportunity to win against Fresno State? And not that it's going to be somebody different against Texas or against Arkansas State, but it's really going to be who is it that is able to pick up the game plan, execute the game plan at a high level. And then ultimately it's going to be who do they trust to take care of the football in decisions and throwing the ball, when to hand it off, read options, all of those different things will play into the fact that you've got to be trusted with the football. And I'll go back to what Mike Hart said, and we talked about this in terms of turnovers from the running back position. The football is the program, and you've got to be able to protect the program. Possession of the football is of the utmost importance. The basics of it is, hey, defense, get us the ball back. Offense, hold on to it as long as possible and end up scoring points at the end of each and every drive. So it's really going to come down to, I believe, who is it that protects the ball and gives Michigan the best chance to win in this game.
Number 4 on our 7 from 77. We also heard on Monday a lot of the depth chart, at least the likely starters and maybe the first reserve, if you will, from defensive coordinator Wink Martindale. We also got a pretty good alignment on how the offensive line will be broken down. Sharon Moore saying that 3 spots solidified. You mentioned the guards, Josh Preeb and Giovanni El-Hadi, and then at left tackle, Miles Hinton has solidified that. Just your thoughts, takeaways on what Sharon Moore and Wink Martindale revealed depth chart wise. Michigan, and not a program that has revealed a depth chart a whole lot, but I think we have a pretty good idea going into this, and they confirmed a lot of it.
Yeah, and I mean that right tackle position is really between Evan Link and Andrew Gentry. When it comes down to that, it's not. There's some experience obviously in there. There's a guy that's very young in Evan Link, who I think is developing into a really good offensive lineman. Do they want to go early on with him and maybe have some bumps in the road because he's new, he's young, there are going to be some young mistakes, but the upside is there. And then you look at the center position. I think one of the interesting things was the emergence of Dominic, Gadice. I think he's a player that gives you a little bit more athleticism at that center position. Greg Crippen has paid his dues. I wouldn't be surprised to see either one. And in terms of what Wink had talked about, I love the fact that, one, he wants to be an aggressive coach. We've seen his proteges, Mike and Jesse, the last 3 years, implement that defense. And we know it's an attack style defense. But if you're only rushing 3 and you're rushing 4 and you're putting pressure on the quarterback has no times, it's going to look like an attack style defense, even though they're not blitzing. And that's what you can do when you have, Kenneth Grant and all of the cast of characters up front. I think Derek Moore is poised for a breakout season. Josiah Stewart as well. Both of those guys were 5.5, 6 sacks last year. I think both of those guys could be double-digit sack guys. And if you're able to put pressure with 3 or 4, now all of a sudden you're dropping 7 and 8 into coverage. That's a quarterback's absolute nightmare.
Before we continue on our 7 from 77, we told you earlier DTE Energy can help their customers lower their energy bill and reduce energy use. John, tell our fans and today our viewers about some of those.
Well, there's 3 of them. First, DTE's virtual interactive energy efficient home. It's a 3D virtual experience that takes you from room to room in your home, teaching you how to incorporate energy efficiency easily into your daily life. And second, it's the free DTE Insight app. It shows you how and when your home is using energy and how much it costs. So if you want to avoid surprises on your energy bill, it's a free download. Check it out, look at it, and find out for yourself where you can save some money. It's in the App Store or Google Play. And third, the DTE marketplace. You could shop for energy efficient products like LED light bulbs and smarter power strips with Wi-Fi thermostats. And you can also get rebates instantly applied at checkout. If you want to learn more about these energy saving tools or others, head to dteenergy.com/save energy. That's dteenergy.com/save energy.
Number 5 on our 7 from 77, as mentioned earlier, John's Keys to the Game comes up Thursday afternoon here on the podcast feed. For those watching, that'll be audio only. Fresno State, this is a strong program. They've had some really good seasons, but this one can have some unfortunate adversity. Jeff Tedford, longtime college football coach, he stepped down due to health concerns in mid-July. Former assistant head coach and linebackers coach Tim Skipper is the interim. Sure, that had to make it a challenging camp. I also think that there will be some unique and understandable emotion on that visiting sideline come Saturday night.
Yeah, and that emotion is going to be for the new coach. You want to be able to win for him, but the emotions of the coach that recruited you and the fact that he had to step down due to health reasons. And everybody's going to have high emotions. They're going to be running at an all-time high for the Fresno State team. And, it's somewhat similar to what I experienced in 94 to 95, where Gary Moeller was the guy that recruited all of us and stepped down the year before. Lloyd was the interim coach. So you wanted to play and support your former coach. You also wanted to play and support the coach that was there. And when you have an interim coach that was on staff, it's always easier moving forward as a player if you have the confidence of your coach. You don't want to have to prove yourself to somebody new. And yeah, coaches come and go and assistant coaches change. But to know that he knows me. He was part of the regime that was there that recruited me. All of those things play into it. So these kids for Fresno State are going to be playing for not just, Coach Tedford, and thoughts and prayers go out to him. And we hope that he's able to conquer whatever it is, whatever that challenge is, but it's also for the new coaching staff, and the players want to prove that, hey, we can get the job done as well.
I think it's fair to say that this Fresno State team, with a returning productive quarterback in Mikey Keene, which I think is always key when it comes to if you're going into a place like Michigan as in a bye game situation, as a group of 5 program, you have a returning quarterback, and that gives you certainly more confidence. I feel like compared to the last 6 non-conference games over these previous 2 seasons, all at home, all pretty handily won by Michigan. I feel like Fresno State comes in better than all of them. Fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that they do have a roster that is very familiar with the system, nothing was changed in terms of play calls, who's calling the plays. And one of the things as a player, especially college players, you want to know what the expectations are. What are they on this individual play? What are they on Monday, Tuesday, throughout the course of the week? What are they on game day when we travel? And that familiarity with this staff, along with the offense, the defense, and that you have a returning quarterback, that you have an offensive line that is solidified, that you have some of those key components, all of those play a favor into Fresno State.
Number 6 on our 7 from 77. We do it throughout the course of the season. Fun to get it going. Quick hitters on some of the Big Ten games and storylines of note. We start Thursday night, Minnesota hosting North Carolina. Interesting week 1 test. Minnesota's not an easy place to play when that place is humming, and I expect it to be as a night game as they try to row the boat.
Yeah, well, way to throw that one in. Yeah, and PJ Fleck is a very emotional coach. He's a guy that gets his team fired up, and they always seem to be a team that plays above their level. And this is a team playing, against a Mac Brown coach team at North Carolina, against a team that has had success recently in the ACC. Albeit maybe not, they're replacing a quarterback, but Minnesota is a team that always is going to play with a very big offensive line. You know that up front on both sides of the ball, they're going to be physical. They're going to run the ball, and they're breaking in a new quarterback as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun, especially to know that you can kick this thing off, the Big Ten season, on Thursday night.
Then Friday, Michigan State entertaining Florida Atlantic, Western Michigan heading to Wisconsin. Any big thoughts on either of those two?
Well, for Wisconsin, it's a new quarterback. Tyler Van Dyke transferred from Miami. He won the job, and they're trying to continue to instill this air raid offense. They're completely changing what this Wisconsin offense is. It was always a ground and pound, and they're still going to run the ball. But when you're trying to air it out as much as they are, that's a complete departure from what they have been. And I think Luke Fickell is a coach that is going to preach the basics. They're always going to do things, all the little things. I don't expect them to shoot themselves in the foot, even though they're going to expose the ball a lot of different ways. They're a team that's going to always execute. And for Michigan State is, with so many new players, new coaching staff, Childs coming in, being familiar with Jonathan Smith in his time together at Oregon State. It's going to be interesting to see what type of mentality they take the field with, and what type of identity they're trying to build at Michigan State.
Noon Saturday is where Big Noon kickoff will be to begin the season. Penn State at West Virginia. I'm fired up for that one. If you're going to have a Michigan night game, that's a pretty good appetizer for the early window.
Oh, man. And when you're thinking about what Penn State is and what they could be, take James Franklin out of the equation, but just the players, whether it's a returning quarterback in Drew Allar, whether it's Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, two guys that have been there going on their third year. They've got a great 1-2 punch. They lost their left tackle to the draft, but they are a team that is recruited very well up front. And then they got Julian Fleming, the transfer from Ohio State. The wide receiver room is going to be loaded up again. And then defensively, this is where they're really going to shine. And it all kind of revolves around Abdul Carter, who is a third-year linebacker now. And go back to what I'm just talking about here. You got a third-year quarterback, third-year running backs, third-year, dominant defensive linebacker. That recruiting class is now old enough. All the growing pains should be behind them, and they're a team that is, a lot of people have them projected not to win the Big Ten, but to be a playoff team. So it'll be interesting to get a first look at them.
3:30 Saturday, Ohio State opening against Akron. Their September schedule doesn't certainly have any sort of big potential roadblocks. Week 2 hosting Western Michigan, bye week, then home matchup against Marshall before going to Michigan State to wrap up September. They really get into the meat of their schedule in October, so maybe not so much just for week 1, but in the month of September, what will you be keeping an eye on down in Columbus?
Well, I want to know and this is not a number that I know is factual. It's one that's been reported. What does $21 million buy you right now in NIL and the transfer portal. And it's not just money that is going to those guys. It's guys that are already on the roster. Guys, this is a group of guys that have made a similar decision to what we saw Zach Zinter, Blake Corum, Cornelius Jansen make, where, hey, unfinished business. They've talked about that. They've all made that decision to come back because, one, they want to beat Michigan and they want to win a national title. They are probably the most talented roster in all of college football this year. And it's a matter of, are they going to be able to be a physical, tough football team? That's going to be the question. And we'll get a chance to see a little bit of that. Now, they're not going to be tested, but a little bit of that with a new quarterback in September.
Then the night windows, and I emphasize plural, night windows. The 11 p.m. Big Ten Network slot will cap the day with Washington hosting Weber State, but also 7:30 Oregon and Idaho in Eugene. UCLA actually traveling to Hawaii. It'll be a little bit unique to get used to. Thoughts on any of those three?
It's going to take a lot to get used to a Big Ten game starting at 11 o'clock at night. And, you know, it's the post Kalen DeBoer era in Washington, mass exodus of players, whether it was to the NFL or through the transfer portal. What's this team going to look like? That's going to be what everybody's looking at. And in regards to Oregon, it really comes down to, they have one of the most talented group of receivers. We've always talked about that at Ohio State. Now it's back in the Big Ten, but it's at Oregon. And is Dylan Gabriel, the transfer, who's going to be running the show for that offense, are they going to be able to gel? Is he going to be, good enough in the Big Ten? These are all questions. Are they going to be physical enough? Because I thought they were, of the Pac-12 teams last year, the most ready to come into the Big Ten. Yet when they played Washington twice, they got out physical by Washington that we found out wasn't a very physical team. So there's some question marks. They're very talented, but are they going to be able to come into the Big Ten and win right away? I think they will, but we'll see.
Yeah, most people have Ohio State 1, Oregon 2 in their Big Ten prognostication. You alluded to the number of NIL for Ohio State. We'll see whatever that number is for Oregon is worthy of that. Sunday, USC, LSU. I almost forgot writing this down because it just doesn't feel like a Big Ten game, but it is. It's in Vegas, and it's pretty juicy.
Oh, it is, and it's going to be, what's this offense for USC look like post Caleb Williams? And will they be able to play any defense? Will they be able to protect their quarterback? Those were the questions coming out of last year. How much were they able to address that by developing players in the transfer portal? Can they protect their quarterback? And I think the biggest question is going to be defensively. Last year, they played almost no defense. Will they find something that works for them as they enter a very physical Big Ten?
All right. The only other thing Big Ten-wise, the league announced its title game tiebreakers. Remember, 18 teams, no divisions, head-to-head first, as you'd expect. Then it's record against common conference opponents overall. And then it's record against common opponents taking standings into account. So, okay, if you're tied for second, did both teams face the number one team in the Big Ten? No. Okay, we moved to the third. I mean, it's going to be kind of a cluster if and when it happens, and there is no head-to-head matchup there. But, I mean, we're not going to really know how to digest it until it happens for a first time.
Yeah, and I mean, there are scenarios where it could end up in a coin flip, which I think would unbelievably
very unlikely. But yes,
right,
that
very
is
unlikely.
at the very
all
end
the way down at the very bottom. And you and I were sitting together when we got the press release of 4 pages of tiebreakers, which you can anticipate in a situation like this where there are no divisions. At some point, it's going to happen. How far down the list? If you get all the way down to the list. This goes back to, whether it was Michigan going to the Rose Bowl or it was Ohio State or Iowa, and it was ADs voting on it, a secret vote. Like, this could become part of Big Ten lore. I hope it never comes to a coin flip, but if it does, it means it's been a hell of a college football season.
Yeah, that would draw one heck of a TV rating if there was just a coin flip televised?
Oh, it's got to be televised.
Oh, that'd be amazing. And you have like NBA draft lottery style where you have the two head coaches sitting there with their, it'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. Number 7 on our 7 from 77. Just some thoughts on the other week 1 games of note. Georgia, number 1 team in the nation. They are around a 2 touchdown favorite against 14th ranked Clemson in Atlanta. Big season, I think, for Clemson to see. Was last year just a blip, or are they tearing down, maybe 2 tiering down in the grand scheme of things, especially now the ACC, it's disadvantageous to be in that league versus the Big Ten or SEC.
Yeah, and schedule will matter. All of these things are going to matter, and this is a great opportunity for Dabo Swinney, who has been very resistant to the NIL. He's been very resistant to the transfer portal, and he's going up against the team in Georgia that they're going to be playing this entire season with a gigantic chip on their shoulder. They lost in the SEC championship game to Alabama, ultimately were held out of the playoffs. Most everybody believed that they were one of the top 4 teams last year. They didn't get a seat at the table. I know Florida State, who already lost this year to Georgia Tech, felt like I thought they were going to come out with that chip on their shoulder. We didn't see it, but I think Georgia is definitely going to be that team. And Clemson might be in for a world of hurt because they're just not playing with the same athletes and the same depth as Georgia's playing with.
Number 4, Texas, starting the season against Colorado State. What are you watching for as a Michigan fan in that one?
I want to see Colorado State, and I think it's kind of appropriate that Michigan opens with Fresno, a respectable team, and Texas opens up with Colorado State, a respectable team, and a team that's going to come to the table playing a physical brand of football. Jay Norvell is not a guy that's going to pull any punches. We've heard him go back and forth with Coach Prime last year in the Colorado State matchup. He's a guy that is going to demand his team to play physical and back down from no one. Texas ultimately, I think, is just too talented. But how does Texas replace 2 stud defensive tackles? How do they replace 2 wide receivers that were taken very high in the NFL draft? How do they play when they're down to their 3rd, 4th, or 5th running back because of injuries that have occurred during training camp? And it all come down for Texas. I'm going to be watching Quinn Ewers. Last year, there were moments where he looked spectacular. He was a guy that you thought, if he comes out, he could be the number 1 overall pick because of his talent. There were other times, if you watch the Texas-Oklahoma game, where you're like, it looks like the kid is playing in high school. Just decisions. And we talked about the decision-making for Michigan's quarterback and protecting the football. If Quinn Ewers protects the football and he goes out there and plays to the level of his talent, it's going to be a really hard team to face.
Number 7, Notre Dame, traveling to 20th ranked Texas A&M. In the new setup of the 12-team playoff, this game, I think, will have more of an impact for the winner than it will for the loser. And I think that's very much reversed in the 4-team playoff landscape.
Well, yes and no. I think if Notre Dame loses this game to Texas A&M, it really puts them in a hard spot because they don't play the toughest of schedules. Their toughest games following that are Florida State, which is a home game, and then USC at the end of the season. That's going to be their marquee matchup. They don't have a lot of opportunities to stake their claim in regards to, hey, we want to be a playoff team, and not only a playoff team, but we want to be seated as high as possible, which can only be 5 because they're not in a conference. This one, I think there's a lot at stake for Notre Dame just regards to their schedule. For Texas A&M, they're looking at a team that, replaced their left tackle. He was taken very high by the Chargers, a team that is going to have a new quarterback. And they're looking at this as an opportunity to get the 12th man involved because it's going to be in College Station and try and wreak havoc early on in everybody's college football playoff predictions.
Last one, and again, this is more talking about the big 2 in the grand scheme of the Power 4, 19th ranked Miami at Florida. If you assume that the 2 touchdown favorite Georgia Bulldogs will take care of Clemson, you're not going to have a whole lot of conference overlap. So if you are the higher ranked team, I don't think a lot of people have Florida as a national contender or an SEC contender this year. This is a big game for the ACC because, there's going to be some comps, some discussions around this, and they're just not going to have the same type of strength of schedule the ACC will versus SEC or Big Ten teams.
Yeah, and you want to talk about strength of schedule. Florida, it's an absolute gauntlet. First of all, they start off with Miami. Thankfully for them, this one is a home game, but they also play Texas A&M, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. That is an absolute gauntlet. And it's our old pal, Graham Mertz, as their quarterback, former Wisconsin quarterback, highest rated quarterback they've ever had. I think it's a better fit for him down at Florida, and it'll be very interesting to see how they handle early on, knowing that they've got these tough games on the schedule. Is this a game they believe? I'm sure they believe it's winnable, but is it actually winnable for Florida? Because they're going to have to steal them when they can.
All right, so that's our 7 from 77. Again, a reminder for audio listeners, Zeke Berry up next. So if you're watching on the stream right now, make sure to check out the audio version coming out Wednesday morning. Zeke Berry, some great insight getting ready for the season. So Zeke Berry on the audio side. On the video side, it is great to be joined by a member of our broadcast team, former Michigan offensive lineman, and a pretty dapper young man in Jack Miller. What's going on, Jack?
Gentlemen, it's good to be with you. Good to see your faces.
Look at you, freshly cleaned up and got the hair combed, and you got the picture behind you. What's that, the Michigan League?
Yep, I think that's the law school, if I'm not.
Oh, yeah.
Mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah,
Law
I'm in our office here in Ann Arbor today, so I figured I would wear the Block M proudly and put this in the background. You guys don't want to see what my office looks like, so I went to one of the conference rooms.
Tight frame.
Yeah, keep it in here.
I just know, we're on video here. Jack and I, Michigan polo. John, I think, is wearing a T-shirt from 1997.
Hey, that's a good T-shirt. Good T-shirt.
And a good year.
Got the black M.
So yeah. Absolutely. So again, for those watching, this is something new. We're gonna sprinkle in Jack throughout the course of the season. We'll take some questions. We've already gotten a few, which we'll take some comment Q&A here momentarily. Jack, I want to start with the question I asked John off the top. You over the course of last season so frequently said, hey, enjoy this, soak this up. This is not how it normally goes. Not just winning all these games, but the way that Michigan did. The fact that this team last year was not truly challenged until November. If that happens this year, then that'd be amazing. But week 2, Texas, we all know that's going to be a heck of a challenge. So how have you digested this offseason coming off winning a national championship? There was a desire, a drive to get to 2022 and get to 2023 because of how the previous seasons ended. This offseason, it's felt different to me. Has it felt different to you?
Yeah, I think so. I try to, take a little bit of my own advice and appreciate it and enjoy it for what the last 3 years have been. Obviously, nothing short of fantastic. And, like I was saying the entire last year, you have to appreciate that. You have to respect that and try to soak that in as much as you can because, football puts everybody in a mindset of what's next. You're never satisfied. What comes next? And I think it's a great attribute to have. But if you don't stop to smell the roses every once in a while, you leave yourself wanting more. And so, definitely try to appreciate that at the beginning portion of the season. But, the good news is there's so much that's new this year. There's so much change that has happened and is going to happen as we get into the season here that it's exciting. And to your point, over the last couple of years, it was can't wait to start it up again and give this thing another shot. I feel that same way, even coming off a national championship, that this is going to be a new look team, new look coaches, players, all the above. And that's the beauty of sports. You always get to go do it again. And so Michigan's going to have to reinvent themselves. There's some question marks out there. There's some things that they got to feel great about. There's some things that everyone's going to be really intrigued to find out how it plays out in real time as the football season gets underway. So, now the excitement's here. Football's back and can't wait for kickoff on Saturday night.
Of all those changes, what intrigues you the most leading up to Fresno State?
Well, certainly the offensive line. You and I are biased about that, John, right? I'm interested to see how that group comes together. And really it's, a lot of those guys have played, right? Maybe not in super meaningful moments, but they've got a lot of snaps. They know what game speed is like. They've played in the big house in front of those fans. So it's not as if these guys are just, coming for their first time and it's going to be, all bets are off. Let's just see what happens. These are guys who have played. So be interesting to see, can they click early on? I'm really interested to see that. And then the defensive line, right? I mean, we know what they're supposed to be. John, I've heard you talk a lot about, thinking that Derek Moore is going to take the next step this season. It's going to be really, really fun to watch Wink Martindale go to work with that front offensive line, Will Jansen in the back end, and let those linebackers get really creative, blitz packages, where are they going to come from, confuse different offenses. There's a lot to look forward to. You can talk about the quarterback battle and what's going to happen there, and that could go really, really good. It could be a little bit of a struggle, right? The last few years, you had that ramp up period of basically the majority of the season to get ready for the postseason and those big games with Penn State and Ohio State last year. You're not going to have that this year. You got to figure it out pretty early. So the dynamic, I think, of camp probably changes because of that, and definitely will to open up the season. You got to put, your best players out there and try to figure it out quicker. Who's going to give you the best shot to win? It's going to be really, really exciting to see this all come together.
Question from a commenter, Rico. If we see that Donovan has not improved his ability to run through contact in game one, will Mullings become the bell cow running back before the season winds down? My thought on Donovan in terms of running through contact, I kind of give him an incomplete. We don't know for sure because Blake Corum was so valuable in that area, and Donovan was used as more of that change of pace type. I definitely think Kalel Mullings will have a role. He was voted an alternate captain. He's trimmed down a little bit. He has a real place on this team, but I'm curious along the lines of this question, what steps do you need to see from Donovan to have him become that bell cow type, that Blake Corum-esque run? I don't know if he's going to get the same number of carries as Blake Corum, but he might get the same number of touches in certain games because of some of the pass catching stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question to ask. Can he be, the thing that Blake was so great, I mean, he had a lot of great things about him, but he could get hit at the line of scrimmage and fall forward for 3 or 4 yards almost all the time. You always knew it was going positive. We haven't seen that from Donovan. To your point, maybe it's undecided yet because he wasn't ever put in those situations, but we know his skill set was to get out in space, outrun people, and make people miss, and then he was really hard to track down. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. You could go across running back, wide receiver, tight end. They got a bunch of talented guys that all bring a different skill set to the game. And even at quarterback, right? It's going to be really interesting to see how the coaches want to use all those guys to fit the mold and the scheme that they want to play in. You want talented guys on the field. You want to put the ball in playmakers' hands. They have a lot of those basically at every position right now. Give them credit for recruiting and developing the depth that they have over the last several years. How are they going to use all those guys, right? If Orgy's not the guy, or he is, how much is he going to run? How much is he going to throw? How do you get Kalel Mullings and some of those other running backs in there with Donovan? You got 3 or 4 tight ends that can play. Wide receiver, you got some the 3 guys that are going to be out there playing all the time. What comes after that? I think that the coaches, it's a great challenge, but I think that they have one on their hands to figure out how do we get these guys touches? How do we figure out which of these guys give us the best opportunity? I think there's still a lot of question marks on that, and maybe it would take a few games to figure that out for the duration of the season.
Well, the thing about Donovan is, Brian, you've been there with a lot of these conversations that we've had with him last year and even the year before. He's known as Big Play Donovan for a reason. He's had a lot of big plays, and there was a mentality at the beginning of the season where he was trying to turn every play into a big play. He was just looking for that breakaway 85, 75-yard run. Whereas,
why'd you use those 2 numbers, John?
They just seem to ring a bell. And since we're going to Columbus again this year, we'll see what happens. But I mean, you can't always. Not every play is designed to go for a touchdown, but not every play is going to go for a touchdown. So you've got to be happy with 4, 5, 6 yard pickups, and then all of a sudden, hey, you're able to bust one because Donovan has that breakaway speed. And I think that's where he's got to be patient and not just settle. You could fight for every yard, but understand that some of them are only going to go for 4, 5, 6 yard runs. And there are times when it's a 1 or 2 yard run. Hey, that's a major positive. But then you have Kalel Mullings. Sharon has said Kalel Mullings is going to get more touches. He's going to be a bigger part of the offense. He's also talked about Ben Hall. Ben Hall is going to be a guy that will be a major factor in this offense. The question is how big of a factor, and it's always going to be about trust. He's going to have to continue to develop trust that I will protect the football. That's one thing we know from Donovan and we know from Kalel. They're going to protect the football. Hey, young buck, when you get in there, that's the number one thing. Make sure that you end every play with possession of the ball.
QB battle, guys. How does that spill over to the rest of the team, if at all? And the reality is, with Sharon Moore saying yesterday, it's coming down to Alex Orji or Davis Warren. I think players have kind of downplayed the differences there, but I do think it's fair to say that there would be some difference in how Michigan's offense would attack or would potentially be schemed against, depending on who it is.
Yeah, I think so. They certainly bring different skill sets to the game. I'm not in the huddle, so I don't know exactly from a leadership standpoint, from a camaraderie standpoint, where things are with the team. I can tell you, I think that the perspective that those guys must have is because they've gone through this. Let's not forget, this happened a couple years ago with JJ, right? So they've seen this. A lot of these guys have been a part of this. And that's what happens with really good teams. Iron sharpens iron, right? You're going to have guys battling for positions. That's the nature of major college football and a program that's just coming off a national championship. Good problems to have. I don't know that it necessarily is, frustrating to the team at this point, or would be. The old adage, if you have two, you don't have one. Speaking of quarterbacks, I don't know if that's true in today's day and age. It'll be interesting to see. I think that, this team has had really good examples of leadership, senior leadership, captain leadership over the last few seasons to block out noise and to do their job. And you got to think that is definitely an advantage that this Michigan team has, of a lot of guys who have been around and seen for a long time how to take care of their business. Whatever it shakes out to be at quarterback, I think that they probably trust the coaches that that's the right decision, and they'll go out and play. It is going to be a different look or a different feel because of that. But to your point, Brian, maybe that means that the way teams have to scheme that up becomes a little more complicated, and that opens up a whole new can of worms too. So not the worst thing in the world. We'll see what they end up going with because both looks would be a little bit different.
Well, and here's my take on it and how it affects the rest of the team. And you brought up a great word in trust. The only way that you can have a quarterback battle going into a season with Cade McNamara and JJ and it not affect the team in a detrimental way is the fact that they trusted Jim Harbaugh. I believe the team has built up over, not just as his time as a head coach, because it's a very small time, but the offense, the entire team has been around Sharon Moore. They trust him to make the best decision for this team. And even if your best friend is Alex Orji or if it's Davis Warren, it's about winning games. It's not about friendship. It's not about being cute in the locker room or on the field and, hey, I'm going to do this for my buddy. It's about ultimately winning games. And these guys understand that. They trust Sharon Moore. And you are going to see, no matter who the starter is, I think you're going to see a package for both guys and not 50% for one, 50% for the other. You'll see a limited package, but it's still going to be a different look when each guy comes in there.
The comment from Rico here on the screen, John, I do think Sharon kind of left the door open to saying, hey, ideally they'd like whoever starts against Fresno State to start against Texas. I don't think it's a slam dunk. I don't think it will be an intentional move to try to, make things more difficult when it comes to scheming for the Longhorns for Michigan. But I don't think it is 100% that the person who will start against Fresno under the lights this Saturday is definitely going to start against Texas the following week.
Yeah. And I mean, here's the thing is you always going to leave it open because what you want to make sure that the guy that's starting has all the confidence in the world that even if I make a mistake, I'm not going to be instantly replaced. But you also want to leave the door open for that competition to go on. So both guys are forced to continue to improve throughout the course of the season. I don't think there'll be a change unless it's just an absolute disaster when they take the field against Fresno. It's going to be a guy that they're going to build around, build with, and continue to grow with throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, that's the point of training camp, right? You've had a month, you've had the whole offseason, and now you've had a month to put guys in different situations and figure out what gives you the best chance to go win, to go put points on the board as an offense and go continue to possess the ball, move down the field, score touchdowns, and win games. And at some point, you have to be able to trust your gut. In years past, didn't really matter. There was a ramp-up period. They were afforded that luxury that they could take time, put guys in different spots under the lights and figure out what was working. They don't have that this year, and that's going to be probably the nature of college football going forward for all big programs. So they're going to have to figure it out, trust their gut, and make a move and go forward. But I agree with John. I think that no matter how how it turns out in the quarterback battle is probably always going to be a package for the other person at some point.
So because there is not as much of a ramp up period, Jack, give me a couple things. Take out the quarterbacks, because that's going to be, I think, a very important discussion point before, during, after Saturday night. But what else do you hope to see? Are you intrigued about? Do you have a question for this Saturday, especially when it comes to what looms at noon Saturday, September 7th?
Yeah, I'm interested to see wide receiver position and how they utilize those guys. I think Cornelius Johnson was really an unsung hero in a lot of ways, and maybe wasn't the biggest statistical player, although I think that was sneaky too. But his ability to stretch the field, he was long, he was tall, he could do things like that. They got a lot of speed at wide receiver right now. They got guys that can kind of fill that Roman Wilson type player. But I wonder who can take the top off, right? And especially when you're in a quarterback battle and you need some help from those guys, who's going to really step up? Morris is a guy who showed brilliance in the Rose Bowl. We're looking for a big season from him. Obviously, Samaj. Hopefully, he increased his speed a little bit, doesn't get hawked down in the Big Ten championship game again. You got a lot of guys, very, very talented, but they all kind of play the same, right? So who can be a difference maker at wide receiver to take some of the pressure off of that quarterback battle? And then, again, back to the offensive line in conjunction with Donovan. It was so steady to have Blake and Donovan in the offensive line in the last couple of years. That was the bread and butter. That's what everybody relied on when things mattered. You're going to have to reinvent that. You got all the pieces to do it. Now Khalil Mullins, maybe a little bit of that thunder to Donovan's lightning, and a new offensive line that's new together. So can they find that cohesion, and can they play together early in the season? If they're able to do those things, I think the defense is going to be just fine and should be able to keep them in every game, and is going to be very, very electric. If they're able to piece some of those question marks together, which I think they have every capability of doing, I think they're just where they want to be, and it should be a really, really great season ahead.
I'm really excited to see some of the names that we've heard about in recruiting, or that we've seen in the transfer portal, that are going to come in and excuse me, and be a bigger part of this team. And it's guys like Marlon Klein and the skill set that he has opposite Colston Loveland. I mean, his speed, now that he understands everything, not just what the play is, but the why I'm doing this and how it affects everybody else around me. Ben Hall, I already talked about him. I'm really excited to see him play a bigger role in this offense. Defensively, or offensively, Evan Link. A lot of positive things coming out of training camp about what he could do at that right tackle position. We don't know if that's going to actually be him. I think he's going to play a big role up front. TJ Guy on the defense. This is a guy that every single teammate, every single coach that we've talked to has said, this is a guy, he's not a starter, but he plays like a starter, and he's going to get a lot of run. Ike Awuna is another guy that I'm really excited to see. And then in the secondary, I talked about Jair Hall. I've talked about Makari Page, talked about Will Johnson. We all expect big things from those guys, but it's the transfers of Amir Hall and Wesley Walker. How do those guys, what do they add to this defense? Both of them are coming with a great experience, but it's a lot of the new names, whether they were here or they're transplanted here, that I'm really excited to see against Fresno State.
So Sharon Moore was asked, it was a couple weeks ago now, just broadly, players who have stood out. And he mentioned a bunch, and all of that certainly, any player he mentions there is relevant. He doesn't quite have the Jim Harbaugh, I'm going to list off the entire four deep and go with everybody. But the first player he mentioned, which I think that's the instinct name, it was TJ Guy. And he has been a pretty common refrain from a lot of people. And I'm fascinated by that. To me is maybe the biggest thing I'm curious about going into Saturday night. Michigan's defense had so many guys who could play last year. There's no denying that the star power of this team is at the point, and maybe definitely in terms of potential draft setup, next year, it'll be higher performing for this team in the NFL draft. But how deep is it, and how will the rotations be? Because Wink Martindale's been very, very open about, hey, I want to blitz a lot. How deep do they go into that? Do they have 5, 6, 7 guys they feel comfortable with in that realm? TJ Guy's going to play a lot. How many more guys are going to play a good amount of snaps?
we talked ad nauseum the last couple of years about the depth of this team, right? And so I think we're all kind of getting to the same point here, which is now that you've had that senior led team, a lot of big time names that will go down in Michigan lore forever that are gone. Now, okay, who replaces all that? So the Mason Grahams and Kenneth Grants of the world, they become the new JJs and Blake types of players, right? That just, are going to perform, are going to be there. And John, that's what you're saying. It's kind of who's that next tier of guys that all of a sudden show up the way some guys did last year and put themselves on the map, like a Samaj Morgan or guys like that you didn't really know a lot about. And all of a sudden, wow, this guy's going to be a great player for a long time here. We talked a lot about that depth. We'll see if it comes to fruition. I agree, Brian. I think that's really where the rubber meets the road for this team is, do they have that next crop of players that all of a sudden, we're looking week 3, week 4 going, geez, they are deep like we thought that they were. And those guys who were, the second tier type of player last year have taken that jump to be the A players, and they filled right back in. And, that's what good teams do. If this wants to, if Michigan wants to be on that type of level every year where they're competing for national championships and doing that, that's what it takes. They've done it so far. Their biggest task now is going to be to do it again.
And in terms of, we all know the starters, right? It's going to be Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, and Derek Moore. And again, that was the 4 that was on the field, 4th down against Alabama in the stop at the Rose Bowl. So we know what they can be and what they're going to do. Now the backups that are going to be rotating in, you're going to see them a lot, are Rayshawn Benny. He's back and healthy. Eno Etta is there. TJ Guy is there. Ike Awuna is there. There's going to be no shortage of players that will be able to, and whether they're going to make the rally group the same as they had last year, where, hey, if somebody's getting tired, they're going to, have a hockey shift change, but you're going to see all of those guys rotate through. So you're still going to have 8 or 9 guys. The names are just going to be a little bit different, but I think the production will still be there. And then at the linebacker position, when you have Jayshawn Barham, the transfer, who is an NFL-style linebacker, this dude is going to absolutely knock some socks off next to Ernest Hausman. And then it's Jaden Hood, Jimmy Rolder. Those guys are going to come in and be able to spell them a little bit. There's going to be no drop-off. They've got plenty of guys in that front 7 to go too deep at every position.
Michigan's ability to supplement the roster with the transfer portal has been one of the many key lifelines for this program. And I think you mentioned Barham. We talked about Josh Preeb. This has a chance to be. CJ Charleston was a guy that Sharon Moore mentioned on Monday night's radio show. Definitely some guys there. Jack, before I let you go, you got your championship ring recently. I'm sure you've seen the banner at the Big House. It's been one heck of an offseason. And for those who have been listening to the podcast, you had such a unique top play last year. It was the final kneel down. Literally, it was no one else's outside of you being Roman Wilson's agent. With I think Roman had your other 9 plays. Outside of that, it was such a unique take on it. It's why if you're watching the stream now and you haven't checked out, all 5 of us 3, Jason Vaughn, Doug Karsh, did our top 10 plays from last year's championship run. I look forward to doing that series again next year after another, what would it be? 16-0, right? Emotions for Saturday to get back in the Big House, knowing that this is the defending national champions. Like that has a level of uniqueness that obviously only one program a year can have.
Yeah, pretty special. And I think it'll hit a lot of people like me going into that stadium Saturday when you get to see it and everyone's back in the stadium together. You get to see the banner. They'll honor that. They'll talk about that. Pretty special thing, no doubt. I was shocked that, especially John, that nobody else had a kneel down in the national championship as the best play. If you said at the beginning of the season, what's one play you're looking forward to, I would have said that, right? Kneeling down in the national championship for a win. And John was very critical of everyone's picks. And if they weren't, if it wasn't the goal line stand against Alabama, he was not going to tolerate it.
You're off the crew.
You were off. You were done. But I think we got John's permission on that I think it worked out okay. And you gave your blessing on that, did you not?
I did give my blessing. It's very commendable of you to, talk about the greatest play that is in any offensive playbook, and that's victory formation.
Right.
It may not be the most exciting. It may be the most
It was left up to interpretation. I think that was part of Brian's, whole shtick.
It was.
There.
It was. So I commend you for that. However, there were many great interceptions, many great touchdown runs after injuries, after, stops and moments of this season, especially 4th and goal to go for the Crimson Tide.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you get the smallest guy on the field, Josiah Stewart, taking on a monster of a right tackle for the Alabama Crimson Tide, and he shoves them 3 yards in the backfield to make a stop and send the team to the national championship. What's greater than that?
Well, but listen, it's all left up to interpretation, and I am really, really looking forward to being able to have the same debate with you guys when we get to the end of this year. I'll tell you that.
Darn right. Jack, thanks for hopping on. Appreciate you kicking off our first ever stream like this. We'll be doing it throughout the year. We'll incorporate Jack a ton as long as he can reserve the conference room there. I think that'll be the requirement.
Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to it. We'll see you soon.
No doubt. Subscribe, Go Blue Podcasts. We'll have Zeke Berry coming up on In the Trenches on Wednesday, Paul Judah on Thursday, and a whole lot more. John, that was fun.
It was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to getting to interact with the fans. And if you didn't miss it, Rico got a couple of questions in there. When we're doing this, you can interact with us and we'll answer questions live, no matter who the guest is, whether I will, Brian will, our guest at the time. It was a ton of fun. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the season and, hey, taking them one game at a time.
No doubt. All right. That's it for us this week. Can't wait to do it again next week. We appreciate it, and go Blue.